I feel like a band that had one hit, but it's sci-fi.
Okay, you were in that Abraham Lincoln movie with Daniel Day-Lewis.
I did the Abraham Lincoln movie with vampires.
To see the freak of nature, the oddity of ordinarily.
Why did you say you hate sci-fi?
I said that. I said that. We are going. Bobby, get my phone.
You can run, but you can't hide!
Con Man is a 2015 to 2017 two-season crowdfunded television show written, directed, and produced by Firefly actor Alan Tudyk and starring himself and featuring guest appearances from other Firefly actors, as well as various geek-associated actors, in a satire of his own experiences attending comic book conventions. He released the show on Vimeo in 2015, before the series was picked up by Sci-Fi for Season 2 in 2016, and the first season is available on DVD and Blu-ray, and has been sold from booths at various cons for a few years now. The gist of the show is that Tudyk's self-parody character, Ray Nearly, struggles as an actor only famous for that one cult hit TV show, an allusion to Firefly called Spectrum, bitterly attends conventions to stay relevant, and puts up with clingy fans, his annoying booking agent, and the stifling pressure of political correctness.
I will see you in hell!
The show hasn't got a lot of attention, but what it has gotten has been positive. Geeks just like a show that features elements central to their lives, taking it as a friendly shout-out, and I've never seen any controversy over it. Tudyk was even nominated for an Emmy in 2017 for it. The decision to replace Gamergate figurehead Adam Baldwin with Henry Rollins probably smoothed over any issue that feminist media like the Mary Sue would have with it, so they just didn't watch it and defaulted to praising it as geek-centric media. At least I assume that's what happened. I hope that's what happened. Because when I watched the show, I found it an unfunny, tedious slog, dragged down by mean-spirited humor, and a general reactionary, bigoted theme disguised as progressivism. Like, it mocks conservatives via the Adam Baldwin parody, and praises gay people with out and proud Sean Marr stealing the scenes in one episode. But they also have him delivering jokes predicated on transphobia. Ray makes racist and homophobic media without shame. He has an entitlement to using the word retarded in its formal definition, in spite of how it sounds ableist. And, as I mentioned, the threat of being seen as politically incorrect, and thus subject to social consequences, is featured as an obstacle that Ray faces more than framing him as disrespectful and thus worthy of audience scorn. I haven't approved of Alan Tudyk or Sean Marr since I saw this series, and I can't believe that it doesn't get more attention than it does, being so bigoted and effectively endorsed by all the geeky actors that appeared in it. I would describe it as an inferior knockoff of BoJack Horseman, which premiered the year before in 2014. Alan Tudyk hasn't admitted inspiration, claiming that he was working on the show for years.
I had this story for a long time I wanted to tell, a lot of experiences at cons that I had collected over the years, and the matter was how to get it made.
But it just so happened to come together after a show that bears more than a passing resemblance to just came out, and there are too many coincidences for me to be convinced that it's anything more than a knockoff. The titular BoJack Horseman is a washed-up former sitcom actor who struggles to stay relevant in Hollywood while dealing with alcoholism and general nihilism, not too different from Ray. He's also an egotist who literally masturbates to footage of himself, and he thinks that he's a great actor who should be worshipped while actually being an awful actor, knowing this on some level, and hating the artifice he's built for himself as someone who matters. Meanwhile, Ray loves an action figure of himself that appears to masturbate to underline his thematic self-love, while having the series name Con Man as a reference to how he goes through life in nihilistic disguise as a competent actor who deserves adoration while really being crap at acting and hating his fans. I can't stress this enough. Ray is a knockoff of BoJack. The series is BoJack Horseman Light, its inferior copy. What makes BoJack Horseman work in a way that Con Man doesn't is that while BoJack is portrayed as a person you wouldn't want to actually hang out with, he is made sympathetic to the viewer by portraying his issues empathetically, making him basically a good guy underneath all of his nihilism, and by populating his world with interesting and relatable characters. So we get to take a break from BoJack once in a while. In contrast, Con Man centers on Ray being a nihilistic jerk who hates his fans, while also framing the narrative as him being the only sane man in a bizarre world. His assistant, a poor man's Diane Nguyen, played by Felicia Day, does an unflattering impression of him that implies that he's supposed to be the butt of the joke.
I don't appreciate what I've got. Trophies and awards are the only sense of self-worth that I have. I don't see what I have because my head is stuck so far up my own ass.
But Ray is never isolated as one character with issues, the way BoJack is, and the narrative always puts him front and center as the viewpoint character. His straight white male traits are used to make him the default sympathetic good guy, and his various struggles with political correctness are framed as a universal struggle for straight white men, not with him particularly being a jerk. The line between his good and bad nature is frightfully blurred in a way that isn't done with BoJack, and it leads to the whole show being run on offensive, mean-spirited humor.
I was Angie Dickinson's sparring partner in the made-for-TV movie of the first female prizefighter.
What was it called?
Box.
Also, BoJack Horseman has good writing, good jokes. BoJack's jerkishness has an engaging rhythmic patter that Ray lacks. And BoJack actually has a sympathetic inner life. For all that he's good at delivering comedic lines other people write, Alan Tudyk just isn't that good at writing his own comedy. The first season is mostly episodic, with a few meandering plot arcs, including Ray being offered a role in a big-time Western film, possibly an allusion to Tudyk's role in 2007's 3:10 to Yuma, his attempts to date a woman with mental problems, and him dealing with a potential film version of Spectrum, a la 2005 Serenity, amid various obligations to travel to cons and other geeky events, and interact with fans. In the first episode, booking agent Bobby, played by Mindy Sterling, a knockoff of Princess Carolyn, screws him over by making him ride in an airplane's economy seating as part of a scheme to get a higher cut from his con appearance. He complains about this to Sean Astin's self-parody, a knockoff of Mr. Peanut Butter, saying that the fans make him feel stifled, and Sean Astin pretentiously suggests that he instead use the word retarded, because its formal definition covers his intention, which is a bad idea. Do I even need to explain why that's a bad idea? Tudyk uses it as a joke setup for Ray being mistaken for ableist a few episodes later, but it's just not a respectful word to use in a world where no one uses the original definition besides these two weirdos.
Retard. To impede or hinder.
Say, why not use those words? These two characters are ableist. There's no getting around that. But Tudyk doesn't even try to present it as of ambiguous ethics. They're portrayed as good guys with a good word that will confuse people into thinking that they, or specifically Ray, are ableist.
Too much, you're retarding me.
What?
And then a bunch of disabled fans chase him, like they're gonna lynch him or something. Felicia Day has to save him. It's like the definition of, I'm sorry you were offended. The basic premise of the mistaken offense joke is done much better in 2001's Rat Race, when Rowan Atkinson's character is mistaken for a pedophile while riding on a train. He amuses a baby with a key, the baby puts it down his diaper, and Atkinson is caught trying to get it back. He then says the worst thing that he could say in that situation.
I think I am touching it.
Get away from him!
I can feel it! I can feel it! It's very small!
People grab him, and he's literally thrown off the train. This scene works because both sides are sympathetic. The perceived offense is framed as unambiguously bad, so the parents aren't seen as merely an obstacle in a retarding world, but people whose side we would be on if we didn't happen to see the bizarre circumstances that led up to this. This doofus is also delightfully childlike, and his offense is caused by pure ignorance, not entitlement to doing something that offends people because of technicalities that would make it harmless if only the easily offended knew them. The consequences he faces are extreme with cartoonish levels of violence, but this is framed as appropriate if he were a pedophile, while he bounces back and moves on to the next scene, so the misadventure ends in good taste. Meanwhile, the con man misadventure is just one long, awkward, mean-spirited moment of tasteless humor. Anyway, Sean Astin gives Ray the advice to take a fan's first-class seat by making it fun for him. Ray tries to LARP his way through it, but the fan insists that Ray sign a bunch of stuff in payment. He does so, but the fan backs out because he wants to sit next to Sean Astin, and Ray steals his pen in retaliation, leading to a stupid spat between the two. Haha, Ray hates his fans. I have no idea why this is supposed to be a great shout-out to the geeky community. It's not even funny. Just mean-spirited and makes me dislike Ray, the guy we follow through the whole show. Ray gets to the con and hates it. We just follow him around as he gets increasingly miserable doing con-related activities and hating his fans.
Let me be honest with you. I hate sci-fi.
Wow, what a great homage. What's weird is that BoJack doesn't hate being a one-hit wonder, known for his role in a big sitcom. We can see that it spiritually restricts him, and he has aspirations for greater fame, but he eagerly milks every shred of benefit he can get out of his main source of fame. The humor comes from the disconnect between how important the sitcom is seen by him versus the general public, who just see it as background entertainment. Con Man reverses the dynamic, so now the celebrity hates what he's known for, and the fans care way more than him. And the humor just doesn't hold up, especially when this is all supposed to be an homage to cons and fans of them. Ray sells his autographs, and we see a number of cosplayers in line. As a cosplayer myself, I admit I kind of like seeing an authentic look at what fans wear, but it's not a very appreciative gaze. It's half neutral, half negative. We're laughing at the unconventionally masculine guy in the intimidating Darth Vader outfit, and the traditionally masculine guy in the floofy Tooth Fairy crossplay. It's the kind of show that uses cross-dressing as a cheap source of humor, showing up again later with another crossplayer and a cross-dressing stuntman. Jewel states Mal crossplay isn't mocked though. The humor is restricted to men dressing as women.
I was the only lady stuntman who did his own screams. Still got it.
This is homophobic, transphobic, and just plain mean-spirited, against the spirit of cosplay as a celebration of self-expression that erodes the restrictive boundaries of fashion. It is anti-con. You know, in the con homage.
I hate sci-fi.
He gets drunk and accidentally blabs about the Western role, costing him the part, and making him more dependent on fan events, thus increasing his general misery. I have no idea why this character is supposed to be likable, given that he keeps insulting the main audience of the show, and we aren't even able to view him as a villain protagonist, because the people he clashes with are unsympathetic, absurd caricatures. Basically, the main appeal of the show is the cameos from various celebrities, and even then, their appeal is hit or miss. There's an arc about Ray falling for a woman named Louise, played by Tricia Helfer, who has a weird fixation on a baby doll, treating it like a real baby. This is probably a reference to Tudyk's role in Dollhouse, but also doesn't have anything to do with it besides the basic concept of a doll, so it doesn't really matter. There's no homage to the identity issues, the social issues, the mind-bending plot twists, the action, or even the sex appeal. Nothing of why people like Dollhouse. Just dolls, am I right? It's a good example of how Tudyk's humor and general writing is poorly thought out. Compare this to the Lord of the Rings homage in The Big Bang Theory, Season 3, Episode 17, The Precious Fragmentation. One of the guys discovers an actual One Ring movie prop used in the blockbuster Lord of the Rings trilogy, and they each want to have this fun prop from a favorite movie series, in a way directly parallel with the way that characters in the movies become obsessed with the One Ring. Their dialogue is made to sound similar to lines in the movies.
The ring is mine.
The ring is mine!
The phrase,
My precious,
gets used, and one of them has a nightmare that the ring turns him into Gollum. The whole episode plays homage to a part of geek culture in a way that Con Man only plays at. I have to imagine that Alan Tudyk's version of this episode would be about Sean Astin having a cameo where he buys a ring for his girlfriend, and otherwise having nothing to do with Lord of the Rings, besides the concept of a ring. Rings, am I right? Louise says that her doll represents a child who died, and Ray learns to empathize with her after he develops an attachment to a prototype action figure that looks like him, but any attempt at humanizing this crazy lady gets thrown out the window when it's revealed that she never had any real children, just a bunch of dolls. She is disrespected as a hysterical woman caricature. It's basic sexism plus more ableism, and the whole thing is just a misadventure to keep Ray miserable because Tudyk thinks that's funny.
Why is it that all theaters smell vaguely like musty mattresses and gypsy ejaculate?
Oh hey, casual racism from Leslie Jordan's self-parody. It's not even used to paint the character as a jerk. It's just an offbeat comedic line. I doubt anyone involved in the production even realizes the Romani are an actual ethnicity, deserving of respect and not just a movie trope for the 1930s. Keep this in mind when we get to Ray's racist voice acting. For now, let's talk about the most horrible transphobic comedy ever, masquerading as progressive gay comedy. Ray judges a cosplay contest alongside two gay actors' self-parodies. Leslie Jordan, whose self-parody character is actually straight and pretending to be gay, has a strategy for attracting homophobic women who want to cure him, which is mildly amusing if not laugh-out-loud funny. And Sean Marr, also from Firefly, whose self-parody is totally gay, not even a hint bi. I want to emphasize this because it's used to make a jarringly transphobic joke. First, there's a blend of sexism and ageism when Bobby decides to wear a sexy Kunoichi cosplay, and the big joke is that she's so ugly that her attempts at sexiness revolt Ray. When she performs, however, straight guy Leslie Jordan finds her sexy, and so does gay guy Sean Marr, who thinks that she's a man. Yeah, we're going with the old woman is so ugly that she's manly. Not just a little manly. She's manly enough to turn on the gay guy. That is appallingly sexist, ageist, and homophobic first off, and then it reaches heinous levels of transphobia when Ray corrects Sean Marr's assumption of her gender, and instead of saying, she's hot enough to make me bi-curious, or I could make an exception this one time, Sean Marr incorporates the idea of her being trans into his initial assessment of her as a hot man. I want to emphasize that it's not that he thinks that she's a trans man, someone assigned the gender of female at birth who holds a male gender identity and seeks to transition to the body and role of a man, but that he thinks that she's a trans woman, someone assigned the gender of male at birth but who holds a female gender identity and seeks to transition to the body and role of a woman, and he's still attracted to her as a hot man. He tries to court her as a gay man to another man, appreciating her masculinity and encouraging her to drop her feminine gender performance to be with him as another man.
It is the person inside that I have to see tonight.
It represents a complete disregard of transgender identity, such that it reveals Alan Tudyk and Sean Marr, the real Sean Marr, have no idea what transgender people are even doing, and assume it's a man in a dress caricature. There's a part where Sean Marr compliments Bobby's breasts, assuming they are an example of breast implants, and she makes a joke about being old, which makes him think that there's some kind of trade in used breast implants. It's a joke running on randomness, but the assumption of breast implants as a facet of transgender transition is both wrong and derivative of transphobia, assuming that the female form taken is entirely a creative fiction. Hormone replacement therapy, the combination of taking estrogen and suppressing testosterone, will cause the male body to grow breasts, as a girl traditionally would at the onset of puberty. There's not really a big difference between the two sexes anyway, as the human body is fundamentally a sex-neutral mid-range form that can develop one way or the other with specific sex hormones. Intersex deformities come about when the genes directing one or the other get activated together, and transgender people are arguably a form of that, where the brain develops as one sex and the visible body is rendered as another. Transition is largely a matter of applying hormone therapy to develop the visible body, using the existing genes that say what to do when these hormones show up. A trans woman's breasts are as natural as any other body part, just developed with the artificial application of hormones. A few changes require surgery, but not all of it. However, transphobes who consider trans women to be cross-dressing men assume that every feminine part of their bodies is wholly an artifice. They think of a figurative man who applies his perception of femininity into an elaborate drag lifestyle, and therefore assume that trans breasts must be the result of surgery. The whole Bobby is mistaken as transgender joke only makes sense with the creators having this flawed perception of trans women as men with a kooky lifestyle. And it's just mean-spirited regardless. The way it functions as comedy is by disrespecting Bobby as a woman, saying that she's so unattractive that a gay man is into her as a man, and would sooner assume that she's a cross-dressing man who uses she/her pronouns than that she's actually a cis woman, because humiliating people is funny in Tudyk's world. And the whole thing is just a disgusting mix of sexism, ageism, and transphobia. By the way, when Ray tries to correct Sean Marr and Bobby's gender again, Sean Marr accuses Ray of being transphobic. That's how Con Man frames the concept of transphobia, an inane product of political correctness, serving no other function than impeding, retarding, a man's efforts to tell the truth. Also, what's supposed to be transpositivity coming from Sean Marr's mouth is nothing more than trans fetishism. It's especially disappointing for this to come from the real Sean Marr, a very nice family man who, as a gay man, should be aware of the problem of transphobia and committed to opposing bigotry against all letters of the LGBT acronym. In theory, Leslie Jordan should also have been able to call it out, but it's more forgivable when he's just nearby Sean Marr and not the one that's actually delivering the dialogue. The closest thing that I've ever found to a feminist critique of Con Man praises the show for depicting Bobby as an older woman having an active sexuality in her pursuit of Leslie Jordan and Sean Marr. I can appreciate that, but I'm not sure how much I buy that this depiction is positive. Ray is disgusted by it, and the show dwells on his misery because Tudyk thinks that's funny, and it offers viewers a convenient framing of her sexuality as gross, if they aren't otherwise inclined to appreciate it. Grace and Frankie, this is not. It ends with a Bobby, Sean Marr, Leslie Jordan threesome. Well, points for portraying polyamory as neutral to positive, I guess. The next misadventure parodies Alan Tudyk's voice work in Halo 3, alongside Nathan Fillion and Adam Baldwin. The three characters are neutrally depicted soldiers the Master Chief encounters, and it's really just a treat for players who are fans of Firefly to hear three familiar voices. The actors would return for Halo 3 ODST to voice characters directly paying homage to their roles in Firefly. Con Man does neither of these, and instead makes it about celebrating machismo and humiliating Ray, because Tudyk thinks that's funny, for having to voice the one wimpy character. The show practically calls him a beta cuck. His struggle to assert male dominance leads him to start using the voice of a black caricature character that he once voiced, called Rigmarole, from a show called What's Up, Bitch, but the game studio finds it racist and fires him. Again, political correctness is framed as the real problem, not Ray being racist. Rigmarole further gets him in trouble when he's put on a panel alongside Michael Dorn and Kevin Grevue for a talk on racism in media. This could be spun in a way to earnestly critique racism in geeky media, as with BoJack Horseman's various media critiques, and single out Ray for being a jerk, with sympathetic black characters put in focus. But it's all just about the white guy feeling threatened by scary black men who express anger at racism.
I get a violent urge every time I think about it.
I see red. Sometimes I black out. And when I come to someplace else hours later, I wake up with a blunt object covered in some poor guy's blood.
I do the same thing.
The show is shockingly racist itself, and it boggles my mind that Michael Dorn and Kevin Grevue agree to this. Bobby reveals Ray's history with 4 offensive caricatures leading up to Rigmarole, and his co-panelists get in his face and seemingly try to murder him as he runs for his life. There is no nuance to their identification of him as racist either. They don't ask probing questions to see how he feels about the characters or try to get him to apologize, only to discover he still stands behind it, showing that Ray is uniquely a jerk. It goes from finding out he once did something racist directly to rage mode and trying to murder him. Which really gets to the heart of how privileged people view themselves as threatened by political correctness. They make one misstep that isn't all that bad, just something perceived as offensive, and then minorities overreact to take revenge.
If you wronged us, shall we not revenge?
While the disabled people are simply pathetic and laughable for a bit of cartoonish humor, the black men are depicted as a real threat. We can believe that they could and would murder Ray. Marion, a black guy who doesn't personally find rigmarole racist, rescues Ray, and he's happy to have a fan for once. However, he says a line that Marion does find racist, and Bobby has to save him from one more angry black man. Conman just revels in Ray's suffering, and the threat of political correctness is his nemesis. It's also worth noting that there's a pro-military theme here. Marion is a veteran, and Ray learns to respect his service when he rescues Ray from scary black men. What Marion actually did in Afghanistan is unclear. He just participated in efforts against the Taliban and is awarded de facto hero status. This is a thematic flip of BoJack Horseman Season 1 Episode 2, BoJack Hates the Troops, in which BoJack gets into a petty argument over muffins with a Navy SEAL, who claims that everyone should respect the military as heroes by default, while BoJack rants about how most people are jerks and handing jerks guns doesn't make them heroes, it makes them jerks with guns. While BoJack is framed as a jerk himself, who needs to learn when to shut his mouth, his commentary on military worship is framed as insightful. Conman changes this to make the petty muffin argument instead about racism, something not petty, and the military part into a theme about how everyone should honor soldiers as a matter of fact. It's disturbingly pro-establishment. The first season ends with a Spectrum reunion in the living room of Nathan Fillion's counterpart, Jack Moore, played by Nathan Fillion. There's a parody of restored Doctor Who episodes with a restored Spectrum episode that is absolute garbage, which strikes me as a mean-spirited jab at Whovian restoration projects. And Ray has to deal with Stutter, the Adam Baldwin counterpart, who's angry at Ray for outing him, not as gay, but as a Republican in Hollywood. Which is a little funny, something I attribute to Rollins' acting more than anything. It's also suspiciously similar to BoJack's conflict with his old show's producer, Herb, who holds a grudge against him for not standing by him when he was outed, the old-fashioned way, in a moment of heavy drama to break up the comedy. Many good comedies use the contrast between the two elements for effective writing. What Tudyk does in Con Man is a direct contradiction of the BoJack Horseman subplot, with zero drama, and asserting that being gay in Hollywood isn't controversial at all. So Stutter wishes he were only outed as gay and not a Republican. Yeah, sure. Oh my god. Summer Glau's counterpart, Tiffany, played by Skylar Day, is a former child actor who was an innocent little girl on Spectrum, but is now an overtly sexual woman who is constantly drunk, while Ray feels paternalistic to her, and oh my god, she is an obvious ripoff of Sarah Lynn from BoJack Horseman. I mean, wow, that's not even trying to be subtle.
I had this story for a long time I wanted to tell.
Jack has secured a movie deal for all of them that's a continuation of Spectrum, an allusion to Serenity, and similar to the end of the first season of BoJack Horseman, where BoJack fights for and achieves his dream role in a movie deal. However, while BoJack's awful life starts to look hopeful, Ray hates Spectrum, so he's miserable, because Tudyk thinks that's funny.
Ray, I'll see you
in hell.
And so concludes Season 1 of Con Man. I have no desire to check out Season 2. Season 1 is awful. It's bad comedy, bad politics, and just mean-spirited crap. It's not an homage to the geek community. It's a reactionary, bigoted mess ripping off a much better show. It's sexist, ageist, ableist, racist, homophobic, and transphobic with a theme of nationalism and hatred against people trying to make the world a better place by calling out prejudice. I do not say this lightly. If Alan Tudyk were to be revealed as a member of the alt-right, I would be disappointed, but not surprised. The show reads like far-right propaganda, even as it tries to convince us it's progressive. It is awful. Just plainly awful. Alan Tudyk.
I will see you in hell.
Back in 2015, he ripped off a much better TV show. Please like, share, subscribe, and consider donating to my Patreon. Pledges of $2 or more will earn you an explicit thank you at the end of each video. Thank you.